conocí hasta que abrí los ojos y mis ojos quedaron sobre ti. Cayeron sobre ti. Tú me abriste a mí los ojos para yo realizar que todo lo que había sido solo para poderte ganar. Para poderte ganar. Que no quieres saber que me gustará porque me enseñó que te decía que ya no las puedo amar. Si no las puedo amar, para mí tú siempre serás un amanecer que me ilumina la vida, el día y todo mi ser. Ilumina todo mi ser. Mis palabras algún día te hacen llorar, solo míralo y recuerda que yo solo te quiero amar, amar. Yo te quiero amar, amar. Yo te quiero amar, yo te quiero amar. Yo te quiero a ti amar. En cualquier lugar, aunque esté tan caliente o oscuro que no te pueda mirar, sabes que quiero amar. Aunque esta canción es difícil de cantar, pero todo lo que haría sería solo para poderte amar, para poderte amar, para poderte yo amar, para poderte yo amar. Muchas cosas en mi vida, algunas color negro, las otras de color azul, de color azul.
Thank you, my name is Seaside. Now pass along the mic here. Thank you for joining us.
Hola, muy buenas noches. Oh, ya están dormidos. Allá está el café, si necesita café para levantarse. We got coffee over there if y'all need some coffee, because y'all are falling asleep. But let's get a round of applause for our local artist right here inside. We want to thank you all for being here. I see a lot of faces that I recognize, and I see a lot of new faces, which is really good. So, primeramente, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Mi nombre es René Casas y voy a ser la persona que va a estar hablando acá con mi compañera Ray. Ahorita ella se va a introducir, pero muchos me conocen el trabajo que tenía yo antes en la organización de MILPA. Era el coordinador del programa y póliza, y ya estoy trabajando para la Universidad de Monterrey, donde me encargo de ayudar organizaciones que están trabajando en la comunidad, con los estudiantes que están en la universidad y cómo los estudiantes pueden hacer servicio a la comunidad, especialmente a comunidades de color. Hoy vamos a tener presentadores que van a hablar acerca de temas de inmigración, temas de cómo las justicias criminales están involucradas con inmigración, y también van a hablar sobre temas de DACA y todo lo que pueden hacer estudiantes. Pero antes de comenzar, le quiero dar el micrófono también a otra persona que va a estar acá en vivo conmigo, Ray, para que se introduzca. Yo voy a estar hablando un poquito más en español y ella va a estar en inglés. Si necesitan traducción, cuando las personas van a hablar inglés, por favor de agarrar la señora que está ahí parada, que tiene la mano así diciendo hola, ella tiene la tecnología que va a necesitar para que oigan la traducción. Todas las personas que están acá arriba que van a hablar hoy van a hablar en inglés. Por favor de agarrar uno si necesita la traducción. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ray, who is going to be also co-emceeing tonight with us.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. It's really special that we're doing this here in Seaside, and we are hoping to also have more events in South County and across Monterey. So what we're really trying to do here is some movement building work. We have a beautiful opportunity to understand the school to prison pipeline, understand how it connects with immigration and detention and the immigrant and detention pipeline, and then also understand Proposition 47 and the savings that our county has as a result of Proposition 47. And so that's what we're here to talk to you all about tonight, and we appreciate you being here. The bathrooms are out the door. There's tons of food, so please feel free to fill your stomachs. If you have any children, we have childcare set up over here where there's activities for them, so feel free to let them go over there and play while you listen to the presentation tonight. So we are privileged tonight to have Dave Pacheco here, and he is going to do an introduction. He's from Seaside City Council, and we're excited also, that we have the leadership of City Council behind us as we're working to reclaim our communities and invest in our communities' mental health and the development of our youth. So thank you so much, Dave, for being here tonight, and I'll pass it to him.
Just on behalf of the city of Seaside, I want to thank you all very much for being here. And we do have a great hand for MILPA who put this on. This is an amazing event, very good turnout. And this is the difference maker in our community by having things in Seaside at the Oldemeyer Center, where it unites people. It's extremely important. Just want to introduce a few people that I saw. Elena Miles, she's with the Monterey Peninsula Human Rights School District. She's on the board of trustees and she makes a difference. Ian Oglesby, a former city councilman, Ian Oglesby. Tonight we're going to be talking about change, and there's a variety of people in this room, especially these people out here, that are change makers. I hope and encourage you to pay attention. They're going to go in great program. There's a lot to learn about how we can make a difference in our community, and through Proposition 47, save some money, put it back into our youth, put it back into education, and truly make a difference in Seaside and Monterey County. So on behalf of the city of Seaside, thank you very much, and we look forward to the program.
Wow, can we get another round of applause for all the folks that he mentioned here? I never saw too. Thank you. So, one of the important things that, we try to look for is, cultivating change makers and what that looks like, and cultivating our youth and how our youth are going to get inspired by the current leadership. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce somebody that I've met while I started working at CSUMB, and she is awesome. She is Andrea. Please, Andrea, can you come up here? And I'll have Andrea talk a little bit about herself and the amazing work that she's doing at CSUMB.
Hello everyone. Oh, this is loud. Hello. So I wrote something in English and Spanish, and I hope you all like it. I am not from here, nor am I from there. We cross borders for a better and a better future. We are defined by borders and systems that we are not cleared for us. We have been in hiding for too long. We came for the American dream. What is the American dream? Is it more money? Sacrifice? Pain? Separation of our roots? We have worked these fields. We have helped build this nation. We have educated our children, and that is why today we make change. We speak for our ancestors, for ourselves, and for the future generations. We make our voices heard. We fight for justice. Justice for all. With a nervous, full of joy, and open heart, I stand up upon you today. My name is Andrea Diaz Aquino. I was raised in the community of Seaside. I am also a first-generation college student in California State University of Monterey Bay, majoring in collaborative health and human services. I am for many scholar activists on campus who fight against oppression, systemic violence, and redefine the word human every single day. Being human is a person who loves unconditionally, who loves other humans and sees no labels and fears no hate. As a first-generation college student, I felt lost in the world where the education system worked to keep people of color in the documented communities out. There was no feeling of belongingness. Being a daughter, student, scholar, and a community member isn't easy. But because I am a documented student, felt a disconnection between the school and myself. Therefore, I saw the importance of a community. Thank you to Victoria Ordaz, who has inspired me and has motivated myself and other students on campus. DocuWaters and Allies was created. DocuWaters and Allies mission says, as an 8540 California Dreamer, student neither regret nor take for granted our current immigration status. We believe in social justice and access to higher education for all California students regardless of nation origin, native tongue, or legal status in the county. Undocumented students at California State University of Monterey Bay really value social justice and education because we believe that every student deserves to be given an equal opportunity to achieve with fairness. Regardless of economic and social status, gender, race, and sexual orientation, it is only in an educational environment free of prejudice and discrimination against immigration status that we encourage students can be full participants in creating a better and safe communities. DocuWaters has had many accomplishments within the last year. We now have a page on the university website. We had a Together Revised conference. Allied trainings are also offered to staff, faculty, and students. We have also had a full-time support specialist on campus now. And we hope that in the future we are able to build a dream center on campus. And therefore we hope to pass on this message and inspire community members to keep fighting. To my community who has lifted me and inspired me, I hope to do the same for you. To my undocumented community, thank you for your brilliance, strength, and power. You have helped define the impossible. And to my family, thanks for the support, the love, and the sacrifice. I'll say it in Spanish now. No soy ni de aquí ni de allí. Cruzamos fronteras para un mejor hoy y un futuro mejor. Estamos definidos por tableros y sistemas que no fueron aprobados por nosotros. Hemos estado escondidos por mucho tiempo. Hemos venido por el sueño americano. ¿Cuál es el sueño americano? Dinero, sacrificio, dolor o separación de nuestras raíces. Hemos trabajado en estos campos, hemos ayudado a construir esta nación, hemos educado a nuestros hijos y esa es la razón por qué hoy hacemos cambios. Hacemos por nosotros, nuestros antepasados, por nosotros mismos y por la generación futura. Hacemos que nuestras voces sean escuchadas, luchamos por la justicia para todos. Con un nervios lleno de alegría y corazón abierto, me paro sobre ustedes hoy. Mi nombre es Andrea Díaz Aquino. Crecí en la comunidad de Seaside. También soy una estudiante universitaria de la primera generación de la Universidad Estatal de California, de la Bahía de Monterey, con especialidad en salud humana, servicios colaborativos, obra y sacrificio. Soy uno de los muchos activistas académicos en el campus que luchan contra la opresión, la violencia sistémica y redefinen la palabra humana todos los días. Ser humano es una persona que ama incondicionalmente, que ama a otros humanos y no se etiqueta y que no le teme al odio. Como estudiante universitario de primera generación, me sentí perdida en un mundo en el que el sistema educativo funcionaba para mantener alejados a las personas de color y a las comunidades indocumentadas. No sabía sentimiento de pertenencia. Ser alumno, estudiante académico y miembro de la comunidad no es fácil. Pero como yo, como estudiante indocumentado, sentí una desconexión entre la escuela y yo. Vi la importancia de la comunidad gracias a Victoria, quien me inspiró y me motivó a mí y a otros estudiantes en la universidad. Al resultado creamos Undocumented Waters and Allies. La misión es como AB 540 California Dreamers. Los estudiantes ni se arrepienten ni dan por sentado nuestro actual estado de inmigrantes. Creamos en la justicia social y el acceso a una educación universitaria superior para todos los estudiantes de California, independientemente de su origen nacional, lengua materna o estado legal en el país. Los estudiantes indocumentados en la universidad valoran la justicia social en la educación porque creemos que cada estudiante merece tener igual oportunidades, no importa sus estados económico y social, género, raza, origen sexual. Es solo en un ambiente educativo libre de prejuicios y discriminación contra el estado de migratorio que los estudiantes pueden participar plenamente en la creación de comunidades mejores y más seguras. Undocumented Waters ha tenido muchos logros en el último año. Ahora tenemos una página en el sitio web de la universidad, tuvimos una conferencia Together We Rise, también se ofrecen entrenamientos de alianzas para las personal de la escuela y los estudiantes. También tenemos un especialista de apoyo en el tiempo completo en la universidad y esperamos que en el futuro podamos construir un centro de sueños. Y por lo tanto esperamos transmitir este mensaje, inspirar a los miembros de la comunidad a seguir luchando. Para mi comunidad que me ha levantado y me ha inspirado, espero hacer lo mismo por ustedes. A mi comunidad indocumentada, gracias por su belleza, fortaleza y poder. Has ayudado a definir lo imposible. Y a mi familia, gracias por el apoyo, el amor y el sacrificio.
Wow, powerful, powerful. So that message is being taught all across CSUMB. The beautiful thing around that, when I first started working over there, they held a march. At this march, they had 50 students at that march. And that march was like, 20, 30-minute march. But those students stayed there for 3 hours, talking about ways that they could come together, talking about ways in which they could, develop something on campus. That's something really beautiful. So let's another round of applause for Andrea, please. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist. Her name is Nikki Marquez. Nikki is an attorney, law fellow based in San Francisco at the Immigration Legal Resource Center, an immigration law and immigrants' rights organization that helps individuals remain safely and securely in the United States with their families and communities. She joined the Immigration Legal Resource Center in October of 2015, where she develops resources for attorneys and community members, engages in Immigration Legal Resource Center's state advocacy efforts, and works on immigration enforcement issues. In her free time, Nikki enjoys hiking in Tahoe, playing basketball, and spending time with her one-year-old son. So without further ado, Nikki Marquez.
Is that better? Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nikki, and I'm an attorney at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. And first, I just wanted to say,
we're having some technical difficulties. These microphones are way too loud. I don't know who's the person that's in charge of these microphones, but...
Okay, is this better? No feedback? So thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And really thank you to everyone who put this event together. This is really incredible to see so many members of the community out here tonight and to be a part of this event. I am going to talk about a couple of different things and to sort of set the framework for tonight's discussion and panel. So the 4 things that I wanted to cover first was what's happening now? So immigration under the current administration, so kind of giving an overview very briefly of what we're seeing happening coming from the federal government. And then within that context, talking about what your rights are. So even though there's a lot happening, everybody still has certain rights. And so making sure that you all know what those rights are so that you're informed and empowered to exercise those rights. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to be an immigrant in California and the additional rights that the state has passed through recent legislation that work to try and protect people so that they can be here in our communities and can continue to live safely and securely. And then finally start talking a little bit about immigrant record clearance, and that will kind of lead into the next panelist's discussion on Prop 47. And so to get started, immigration under the new administration. So when we talk about immigration and even immigration law, it's very confusing. And a lot of times that confusion comes from the fact that we're not talking about just one thing. So like every other area, immigration is governed by federal laws. So just like taxes, federal taxes, just like the environment, and these laws can be passed and changed only by Congress. And so far, under this new administration, we have not seen those laws themselves actually change. What we have seen, though, is a lot of change in all of these other areas, right? So we've seen the policies and the practices for enforcing those laws change dramatically. We've seen states pass different laws, either more protective or more cooperative with immigration enforcement. And then we've seen advocates respond by filing lawsuits and trying to push back against some of those laws that are happening at the state level, and then also pushing back against the policy changes that are happening at the federal level. And those changes that we're seeing happening at the federal level are really guided by the principles that we're seeing coming through the current administration. And so the way it works is Congress passes immigration laws, but the executive branch or the Trump administration is tasked with enforcing those laws. And he does that through the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, which is the law enforcement, like the police branch of the Department of Homeland Security. So the administration, even though they can't change the laws, what they can do is make significant changes to how those laws are enforced and how DHS approaches immigration law and how it approaches working with the community. And so we're seeing a lot of big changes that are happening here. And these changes are happening, rapidly. They're changing quickly, and they're changing a lot of different ways. And one of the big things that we're seeing is a change, is that the current administration is asking for a lot of money. They want to build up the deportation machine. So they want more ICE agents, they want more border agents, they want money to build detention centers as they're arresting more people. They need a place to keep them. They want to build a border wall. And they also want to hire more immigration judges. And so as they're detaining more people, they have to go through the immigration court system. And because they're trying to detain and arrest more people, it's creating a backlog in that deportation system. So they want to hire up and put more judges in place so they can deport more people. We're also seeing a shift in the priorities that ICE has in terms of who they're targeting for immigration enforcement. And so ICE has always had the authority to arrest any undocumented individual. That's always been true. But as we saw under the previous administration, there's sort of priorities, right? So there are certain groups and populations that the government is not going to target and go after because they're not perceived as a threat to the community. And instead, they're going to use their resources on people that, have criminal convictions. And that's what this current administration has said. But in practice, we're seeing something very different. And so what they've said is that their highest priorities are people who are convicted of a crime. But then they've expanded that. So it's not just if you've been convicted of a crime, it's if you've been accused of a crime. If you are a person who ICE thinks has committed a crime, or if you're any other person that ICE decides is dangerous. And so really it's kind of redefining what they think of in terms of that, who's a criminal, who is a threat or a danger to our community. And so they're using that same
those same words, but they're just expanding and changing how they're defining who they think is a threat to the community. And one of the things that we're seeing, and this has been in the news a lot in the past couple of months, is that shift in priorities, right? So before, under the previous administrations, there are populations of people that have been granted some large protections from deportation. So we heard in September that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program was being rescinded, and that is a group that the government had previously said, we can't grant you because, again, this is coming from the president, so we can't grant you immigration status because only Congress can do that, but what we can do is say we're not going to target you for deportation. So it gave people with DACA that protection against deportation and also gave them the ability to work legally here in the United States. More recently, earlier this week, we heard about the temporary protected status for some countries that is going to be expiring in the next few months. And so individuals who have been here living in the community for 15 to 20 years now are no longer going to have that protection against deportation. So again, they didn't have legal status because again, only Congress can do that, but what they did have was that guarantee from the government that they were not going to be the target of enforcement actions. So that sounds very bad, and it's hard to kind of take in, and it's really hard to keep up with everything that is happening because a lot of these changes are happening very quickly. However, at the same time, every person has certain rights, and there are still protections in place that apply to all individuals, and there are additional protections that are in place for people that live in California. And so I'm going to shift gears now and talk about what those protections are, and how knowing what your rights are can really help you protect yourself either from deportation, but also just to empower you to kind of make sure that your rights are not being trampled. And before I start that though, I do want to kind of, one of the confusing things that we have in the US are just these sort of layers of law, but there's a hierarchy to all these different layers. And so what we have at the top is the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So these are constitutional rights and protections. And these are the strongest. So these are called the supreme laws of the land. So federal law, state law, and local laws, they cannot go against the laws that are above them, the next level above, right? So federal laws cannot violate the Constitution. State laws cannot violate federal laws, they cannot violate the Constitution. And it goes all the way up, right? So I'm going to talk through some of what those rights look like, and I'm going to start at the top and then work my way down. So, under the Constitution, every person has certain rights, and as a starting point, it's important to know that these rights apply to everybody, regardless of immigration status, national origin, any of those other factors. So these are rights that you have that are based on the Constitution and they cannot be taken away from you by federal laws, by state laws, by local policies and ordinances. And so it's really important to know what those rights are. And there's two that I'm going to highlight. And the first is the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And so, if you're like me and you like any of those like Law and Order, CSI type shows, you probably hear this one a lot. This is where you hear that right to remain silent. And in the immigration context, that is still true. So you have a right to remain silent. If ICE stops you and asks you questions, even a question like, where are you from? Where were you born? You have a right to remain silent, and you should enforce and you should exercise that right, especially in the immigration context. If you are being stopped by a police officer, by a sheriff, and they ask you something like, oh, where were you born? They're investigating a crime, and it's not a crime if you were born in another country, but for immigration, that could be the basis to begin deportation proceedings. So it's really important to remember that you have this right, and this right exists for every single person who lives in the United States, regardless of where you were born, regardless of your immigration status, and you always have this right. If you're in your home, if you're out on the street, wherever you are, you have this right. And the second one I want to highlight is this Fourth Amendment right against searches and seizures. And what this means in the immigration context is two things. One is you don't have to open your door to ICE if they come to your home. So if they come knocking on your
If they come knocking on your door, it's really important to remember you do not have to let them in. You should keep your door shut, period. They cannot make you open that door. They cannot enter your home unless you give them permission. And the same is true if it is in a public space, right? So if it's a space that's open to the public, then ICE can be there. If it's a space that's not open to the public, then ICE cannot be there. And so a good example, I think, is if you think of a restaurant. The restaurant might be private property, but during business hours, the dining room area is open to the public, so anyone can come in, so can ICE. But there are parts of that restaurant that are closed to the public, so the kitchen or the offices. And just like you or I or any of us walking into some restaurant that we just see on the street, we can't enter the kitchen, we can't enter the offices, neither can ICE. So these are the certain sort of protections that we have under the Constitution. Actually, exercising these rights can be really difficult, especially when you're encountering an agent who might not be the most respectful or the nicest person. So one of the things that we've created are these red cards, and we have a stack of them, I believe, in the back corner over there. But they're little credit card size pieces of paper, and basically they say on one side in English and one side in Spanish that you're choosing to exercise your rights, and they cover both your Fourth Amendment right to not let them into your home, but also your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So this can be a really useful tool for exercising your right and making sure that you're not just sort of going along with whatever immigration is saying, but that you're actually, exercising those rights and protecting yourself. And so in summary, you have all of these rights, but then you also just have other things that you can do to protect yourself, right? So you should remain silent, don't open the door, but you should talk to an attorney, get a legal checkup. Just like you go to the doctors to get a checkup about your health, do the same about your immigration status, right? You might not have been eligible for something before, but now you might be, or you might be in the future. You never want to sign anything without talking to an attorney. You don't want to show false documents because that can just create even more problems for you. If possible, just try not to get nervous and definitely do not run away because that will cause more problems. Make a family plan. Be prepared. Know what to do if something were to happen to you, just in any kind of emergency. If for some reason you couldn't pick up your kids from school, who would you call and ask to pick your kids up? And then also just remember that it's your decision. These situations can be really stressful, but just know that, you have to make a decision that makes sense for you in that moment. And now I'm going to move through these next couple of slides pretty quickly, but just talk on them because I think we're going to cover them a bit more with the other panelists. So in California, in addition to all those rights that I just talked about, we have some additional protections. And so our state passed earlier, or I guess last month now, the California Values Act, and that's called the California Sanctuary Bill, and it does two main things. And the first is that it limits cooperation with ICE. So it's basically saying that local law enforcement, it really restricts how they can provide support to ICE and how they can use their local resources and money to help ICE, right? And ICE is one of the most well-funded government agencies. But when local agencies cooperate with them, they're using their local dollars and they're not getting paid back for that. And this is really important in a couple of situations, and I think this is also something that, is highlighted too in the school to deportation pipeline. And so I know that Rosalind will be talking about the school to prison pipeline, but for a lot of students who might be in that pipeline, if they're an immigrant, then that oftentimes leads from prison to deportation. And so this bill is really important in that sense. The other is the sensitive locations. And so basically it requires certain locations in California, like schools, hospitals, shelters, libraries, to pass and adopt policies that limit their cooperation with ICE. And so, moving on. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on quickly before passing it along is immigrant record clearance. And I know that Cesar is going to talk next about Prop 47, but again, for individuals who are immigrants who are not U.S. citizens, this has special meaning. And one of the reasons is that under the current administration, they have expressed that one of their top priorities is to go after individuals with a criminal record. It is one of their top priorities, But especially in California, there are things that you can do about that. And so, let's see. I'm going to move on. So in California, there are a number of different vehicles, legal vehicles, that allow a person to take certain records or certain crimes and convictions off of their record, but also to reduce them. So reduce them from a felony to a misdemeanor. And these can have very serious and beneficial consequences if you're an immigrant. That means that if you might have been subject to deportation or a target for deportation, you can reduce that criminal conviction or remove it from your record, and then you're no longer subject to deportation. And this is really important because a lot of times these criminal convictions are being used against people who have legal status. They might have a green card, they might have a visa, but because of this conviction, they're being targeted for deportation. And so it's really important to kind of remember that in California, there are additional benefits and different additional vehicles that you can use to try and help protect yourself from deportation through this post-conviction process. And I think that's all the time I have.
So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of information involved with this, and there's also, we have several different partners who are here around the back of the room, and I can draw your attention to the Central Coast Immigrant Legal Services back there, and if you have more questions about these types of concerns, feel free to visit that table, and then we will get some red cards in the back also, and please grab a stack and hand them out to your community. The idea here is, you know, there's a lot of community that's not here, so go out and share the word with your friends and family members. So it is my distinct pleasure to now introduce Cesar Lara. Cesar was raised in Monterey County, California. He's currently the Policy and Communications Director for the California Endowment's East Salinas Building Healthy Community site, which is a 10-year strategic campaign in East Salinas, along with 13 other sites to change health outcomes. East Salinas was selected as one of the 14 sites. East Salinas has the highest housing density, lowest education and economic levels, highest crime rate, and the most gang activity in Monterey County. 50% of all gang-related incidents are concentrated in East Salinas. Despite the many challenges that that community faces, there is a strong desire from residents, private organizations, and public agencies to improve the social and economic conditions. There is a wealth of community resources, assets, and skills from which to build change towards a healthy East Salinas. Cesar is all very active on a number of statewide and local boards besides his role at BHC. He is also the executive director of Monterey Bay Project in East Salinas, and prior to his tenure at the Labor Council, Cesar's Intero and a congressional aide to Congressman Sam Farr, intern probably. Cesar attended California State University, Chico, to obtain his bachelor's in international relations, and the child of immigrant farm workers, immigrant rights, and the needs of his community are a priority in his life. Join me in welcoming Cesar Lara.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like Wendell said, I'm the policy director for Building Healthy Communities. I'm also the director of the local labor council. And I was asked today to speak around Prop 47. But before I talk about this great opportunity that voters in this area, voters across California talked about, I also want to talk a little bit about the other work that we do. Because for everybody that's a resident of Seaside, you're saying Building Healthy Communities East Salinas. We're not East Salinas. And as we develop this work, this is a 10-year initiative of the California Endowment. They picked 14 sites across California, and they picked East Salinas as one of the communities. What we learned early on, or a little bit later on, was that we can't just stick to East Salinas. The changes that we want to do across Monterey County cannot be done by just one corner of this county. It has to be done across the whole community. And so one of the opportunities that we have here tonight is for us to introduce ourselves to you. As Building Healthy Communities East Salinas is expanding countywide, this is an opportunity for us to have a discussion about a number of issues. Prop 47 is a great opportunity, and I'll go over it in a second, but we also have other opportunities on the table that we need to discuss. Marijuana was passed by voters in California this last election cycle. That has great opportunity on the revenue side. Communities across our communities are having those discussions. Dave Pacheco on the City Council and others will be having that discussion on how revenue can be used. That's an opportunity for us to have a discussion of how can we use the revenue that we have there to build a better community. But at the same time, we have to look at issues like Prop 47. For generations, the incarceration system in California and across the nation has held people of color back, has been used as a punishment. And now that we have a new industry like cannabis, we need to have a discussion is how can those that have been negatively impacted by the prison system to have opportunities to this new economy, because they've been negatively impacted by us. And so we're going to have those discussions in the community, just like we've had. There's AB 109, which is part of the realignment of California. There's money there. There's SB 678. But Prop 47. Prop 47 was passed by voters in 2014. In California, it was passed by 60%. In the city of Seaside, this community, it passed by 72%. And for that was the community looked at itself and said, we need to do things different. And so Prop 47 changed the way the prison and the jail system work in California. Like it says there, the intent of Prop 47 is to ensure that prison spending is focused on violent and serious offenses. Alternatives for non-serious and non-violent criminals are maximized, and the savings generated from this act are invested in prevention and support programs. That is major. That's going to bring a lot of revenue at the statewide level. And we want to have a discussion about what we're going to do at the local level, but it's important to understand that we have opportunities to really change people's lives. So many people have been convicted of higher level felonies that now can have their records changed. So for those in the room, for those family members that have been negatively impacted, this is an opportunity to really have a discussion on changing people's lives. If you've been convicted of a felony, then the next slide will show. Let's see if this button works. It lowered some of these former felonies into misdemeanors. It said that petty crimes under $950, shoplifting under $950, stolen property under $950, writing bad checks, those are all opportunities where people could change their record. For those that have not been impacted by the system, might not quite understand, but this is life-changing. So many of the programs that are available have a check the box, have a thing where former felons do not qualify, like housing assistance, like certain programs. So if you've been convicted of that, you can change your record. But and voters also had a discussion is that changing those records meant that there's less people in jail. And what does it mean when there's less people in jail? Spending should go down in the prison system. And that's where we needed to have a discussion at the state level on what we do with that money. Because it's all about the savings. Prop 47 goal is to reinvest and really look at how can we use the statewide savings into reentry services, drug treatment programs, mental health treatment, victim assistance programs. And the biggest thing is for every dollar that Prop 47 saves should be reinvested back in the state of California. And making sure that the cycle of incarceration does not continue. So many of our families have seen the cycle of incarceration go from one generation to the other. And so much of that has been communities of color. And communities like Seaside, communities like Salinas, the Salinas Valley, everywhere have been a victim of that. Now, this is an opportunity for somebody as an individual to change their lives, to not have that hanging over their head, but also as an opportunity to how can we use that savings to break the cycle of incarceration. My friend is going to talk about the school to prison pipeline, because so many people start at the school level, where they're negatively impacted due to the discipline opportunities, and next thing you know, because of a low-level drug charge, they end up in the school to prison pipeline. Well, how can we break that cycle? How can we introduce programs? How can we help those that should not be part of that cycle? And so we have millions of dollars statewide that have been saved by this, and that money is getting reinvested. There was a report in November 2015 that reported that the population of the state prison system, because of Prop 47, has gone down by 13,000 individuals in the state prison system. 13,000. That was a savings just in 2015, because the numbers are still being adjusted over here, but that's estimated at about $150 million a year. Not once, a year. But that proposition had something that wasn't taken into consideration. What is that impact at the local level? The proposition did not speak to that. It did not address that. It kept silence on that issue. It's up to communities like us to stand up and have that discussion as a community. Is there local savings at the local level? Because with realignment, what happens is that you have a state prison system with a lot of people in the system, and Governor Brown moved a lot of those prisoners into local jails. Jails that were made to hold people for temporary periods of time have been keeping people longer. They funded it with AB 109 funding to realign some of that money. But what happens with this new law coming in? You have less people in jail. But has the funding to the local levels gone down? No, but there's less people in jail. And the one after that? So what we needed to find out as a coalition, because it was building healthy communities, it was the Labor Council, it was MILPA, those other groups. When Prop 47 passed, the first thing we did is we hit the streets. We've been helping people change their record. And Juan in the back could help you out. Israel, the movie star that you'll see later on the show, could help you out and really change your record. But also at the local level, what do we do? How can we have a discussion? If nobody's going to step up and ask the question, well, let's us try and do that. So what we found. So we partnered up with a number of people in the community and some of our statewide group, and we partnered with the Public Policy Institute of California. Bunch of smart people and look at data all the time. They came up with a statewide report. They convinced our local sheriff and 11 other communities to hand over data from their prison population to come up with the statewide reports. They didn't know we were working with them too. Maybe not have worked with them. But you know, Monterey County was one of the 12 communities. And this is what we found. That all those words up there, and we have copies of the reports in the back, the big long reports, is that the local jail in Monterey County has had a reduction of, how many people? 87 people. 87 individuals that would have been in jail for longer periods of time are now at lower levels on an average. So 87 people less in Monterey County jail because of Prop 47. The funding for the local jail has not gone down. In the last budget cycle, this sheriff said that he's $6 million in the hole, but he has less people in the jail. Doesn't quite make sense, right? Right. So after these findings, we found that there's 87 less people. What does that calculate to? And some of the math is up there about a daily attendance of $97 per person per day, so 87 and 365 days. It was a grand total of a lot of money. $3,080,235 per year. Not for the whole life, 1 year. So let's say 2015, 2016, we're almost towards the end of 2017, that's close to $9 million that the jail has saved. The spending has not gone down, it's $6 million in the hole. We gotta have a discussion as a community. We've been having it with the Board of Supervisors, we need to do more. So, one of the things that we did, because as building healthy communities, we're not just gonna walk in the room and say this is a problem, fix it, elected officials. We're gonna talk to the community. In building healthy communities, one of the things that we treasure is that we need to go out in the community and have discussions like this. And we also did a poll, a political poll. All the recovering elected officials and all the current elected officials know about polling. For everybody else that does polling too. We did a poll in all of Monterey County. And this is what the community, the voters, not the whole community, porque hay muchos que no pueden votar, said 68% of the people that we spoke to in this poll said that oppose building more jails as a form of incarceration. 92% of voters support expanding access to mental health services. Do we need better mental health services in Monterey County? 68% of voters supporting shifting investment from the sheriff to resources for the community. Is that right? Does that make sense? So we did a campaign. Teresa Barrera works for me. She's one of our immigration services person. And she had a billboard outside. The only available billboard in all of Monterey County when we bought one was outside of Childcare. But we hit the ground running. And this is part of our work. And what we're asking is that they should do a financial and management audit of the sheriff's departments. Because something's going on, and there's $6 million in the hole, but they're saving $3 million a year because of Prop 47. We've got to ask those questions. And we need to increase access to behavioral health services, and we need to go towards ending the mass incarceration in the county. And we also need to end the school to prison pipeline. One of the other works that we did in the Salinas city area was had a discussion about school resource officers. A high school district in the city of Salinas, which is the biggest school district in high schools in that, and the East Salinas Elementary School District said no. They were able to get SRO officers, but at a smaller program in one of the school districts. This community had a similar discussion, and a lot of people in the community did not know that. The school board in the Monterey Peninsula area did a 1-year contract. We need to end the school prison pipeline, and my friend is going to talk about that. So if you want to get involved with us, we go to the next slide, this is what we believe in, and you can go to our website, you can get information, you can get a t-shirt, you can have an extra taco, and really support the work that we need to do, because at the end, what we need to do is get loud. We need to get involved, and we need to ask for the things, and we are the kingmakers in this room, we are the kingmakers in the community, because at the end, we got to end these cycles. So thank you, and thank you for me going about 3 minutes over. This was going to get me later. So I'm going to hand this over to Willow.
So yeah, you just heard about a couple of ways that you can get involved. And there's a table in the back with a white tablecloth. If you're interested, we would love to contact you to follow up with you, because we will be talking to the Board of Supervisors about doing this audit, and we need your support as the community. So if you are interested in having us be in touch with you and being part of this ongoing conversation, please fill out the sign-in sheet at the back and leave your email address, and I will probably be the one who's reaching out to you. So thank you again, Caesar, for the information on Part 47 and reinvestment. So I have also the distinguished honor and pleasure of introducing my dear friend and colleague, Rosalind Green Charles. And Rosalind is just a star in the community, and those of you who don't know her, you should know her because she is holding it down here in Seaside along with the Village Project. Rosalind was born and raised in Seaside. She has deep roots in the community and attended school in the MPUSD district. She earned an AA in General Studies from MPC and went on to CSUMB, where she earned a BA in Liberal Studies on the teaching pathway. She worked for the City of Seaside Recreational Department, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and for over 12 years, the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. She currently works with the Village Project, overseeing the after-school program and much more. She has 4 children who have gone through or are going through MPUSD, and I do say that she is the mama of the community here in Seaside. So, Rosalind Charles.
Good evening. Thank you, Willow, for that warm introduction and making me sound like such an awesome person. While they're setting up, I also want to give a shout out and a big thank you to an awesome data guru by the name of Tia Martinez, who excellently designed the diagram that you see now on the screen. This image depicts both the school-to-prison pipeline and the immigrant detention pipeline. These pipelines were created to marginalize people. They were created especially for people of color, black and brown races, and they also sucked in other marginalized communities like the LGBT community, kids with emotional challenges, and mental health issues. Let's take a look at different points where a child is passed off through institutions and sucked into this pipeline. The process begins with the family and the child. We know that when children live in households with traumas such as poverty, mental illnesses, drug addictions, incarcerated parents, and other things like abuse, then these kids are also most likely living in neighborhoods and communities with other families that share similar issues. Now, let's walk a child through the pipeline. We have little Timmy. Timmy lives in poverty. He lives in a poorly maintained apartment complex that's infested with drugs. Now mom has fallen to drug addiction. Dad's incarcerated. Timmy often witnesses an abundance of abuse and tragedy, not just in his own home, but in the neighborhood, in the community. For some of you, this may seem like it's over the top, but actually this does happen right here, even in our Seaside community. So as years pass on, Timmy's now school age, and he goes to school each day carrying all these issues in his backpack. Some days he's hungry, he's tired, he's frazzled, and unable to focus. This eventually turns into a conflict between little Timmy and the teacher. Timmy's backpack of issues has now come across as bad behavior. As far back as I can remember, discipline was directly handled by the administration, either the vice principal or the principal. Now we have what Cesar mentioned, the SROs, the student resource officers on campus. These are actually our community police who've been designated to be at one of the school sites. And now these SROs review most of the discipline issues that come into the office. Because of this, we now see an increase in out-of-school suspension. Since 1972, the probability of being suspended during the school year has doubled for Latinos and nearly tripled for African Americans. Let me just take a moment to mention that the behaviors of these students have changed. It's still typical childlike behavior, and a little more enhanced with kids that suffer from some of the issues I mentioned earlier. But what has happened is that policies have been created to funnel these kids through the pipeline. Once the child is in the out-of-school suspension cycle, they can spin around this wash tub for years. Then we began to see a decrease in supervised learning time. That contributes to kids falling academically behind and disengagement from school. Then it doubles the likelihood of them repeating a grade as well as dropping out. We see increase in unsupervised time in poor, racially segregated neighborhoods, and that leads to increased exposure to poor maintenance, policing, and community violence, which in turn leads to an increase in the chance of arrest, now tripling the likelihood of contact with the juvenile justice system. Juvenile incarceration increases school disengagement and the likelihood of dropping out from a 1 in 10 chance to now a 1 in 4 chance. Dropping out of high school doubles, triples, and even quadruples the probability of going to prison. Juvenile detention increases the likelihood of going to prison by a 1 in 10 chance, from 1 in 10 chance to now a 1 in 3 chance. Now we know that these youth most likely have felony records, and now we come to a major contributing factor to mass incarceration. From 1970 to 2010, the number of people in prison increased by 430%. Since 1996, immigrant detention has also increased by 500%. Again, no change in behavior, change in policy. 53% of people in prison have a substance abuse issue. 56% have a mental health problem. Each additional year that a person spends in prison reduces their life expectancy by 2 years. Upon release from prison, felon status makes all the outlawed old forms of discrimination legal. Legal discrimination increases probability of low earnings, housing instability, and untreated health problems. Residential instability, unemployment, and untreated health problems increases the probability of recidivism. Now, we're put back into prison and detention and deportation. So here we now cross over to what I like to call the generational curse. 2 decades after release from prison, 75% of the people remain in the bottom 20% of the income distribution. When you're stuck at the bottom, so are your kids. Disadvantages passes on from generation to generation. Children of incarcerated parents, especially boys, are now more likely to display externalizing behaviors. Now, if you look at the orange arrow, you can see here, now the student of an incarcerated parent goes to school. Now Timmy's child goes to school carrying the backpack of issues and has a conflict with the teacher. So the cycle repeats itself. It goes on. Having a parent who is incarcerated, suffering from mental illnesses and or substance abuse equals adverse childhood experience, and it's associated with an increased risk of morbidity and mortality as adults. As Cesar mentioned, here in this county, the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District just recently visited the school resource officers in our schools, and despite the loud cry out from the community, the board still approved to have the SROs in our schools. So we have police on our campuses. These police are actually being funded, hear this, with our educational dollars here in our county. We pay for it. I mean, I know there are many other things that our school dollars are well needed for. Textbooks, I know that in the high schools, there's one set of textbooks for most classes where kids can't take textbooks home. So they have to rely on their notes to get their homeworks done. We could definitely take a look at our nutrition system. Healthier lunches would be also another great way to spend this money. Guidance counselors, more teachers, the list goes on. I could go on, but for the sake of time, I'll stop. But we have less than a year now to come up with a solution for this. This is going to come back before the board, before budget. So we're looking to offer some alternatives. So if you want to be a part of this movement, like Willow mentioned, there's a table in the back. It's the table right to my left. We'd like for you to give us your information and get on board with us. Someone will contact you, either myself or Willow or some of the folks from MILPA will contact you so that we can definitely get in front of this. So Salinas had 2 districts that threw it out. So here we are in this county dealing with MPUSD and waiting for it to come back up. So I think that's my time. Thank you all for being attentive. Again, sign up in the back.
Wow, so you all see the data, you all see the numbers, you all see the money. So once again, if you all want to get involved with the Just Reinvestment campaign with local organizations, there's a table in the back that you can go ahead and sign up. We need all the help that we can get. So before I introduce our next guest, we're talking about the school to prison pipeline, we're talking about things that affect youth. And it's really beautiful to see here that at 3rd grade, I was actually on path to the school to prison pipeline. 3rd grade, I actually went up to the school board because they wanted to expel me because I'm so hyper. I'm still kind of hyper, but not as hyper as when I was a little kid. And it's really beautiful to see that my teacher that I had at 3rd grade that kind of steered me in the right direction is actually in the back. His name is Juan Sanchez, who I have the opportunity to now work with, and it's so amazing because he introduced me to drumming, he introduced me to a lot of things that actually I can control my, over hyperness. But, with the term high speed, I was hyper when I was a little kid. So, now I get the privilege of introducing Fred Jealous. I'm sorry, is that the last Jealous? Okay, because I was looking at him like, oh! So, Fred Jealous began his life in an Anglo-Saxon New England American family that had 8 ancestors who fought in the American Revolution. In his almost 50-year career as a teacher, community educator, and community organizer, Fred has tried to combine his love of working with groups of people on new ideas with his commitment to social justice and human rights. His involvement in and ongoing support of the civil rights efforts in the late 50s and 60s, the protests of the Vietnam War, the women's movement, the domestic violence prevention movement, and the gay rights movement have all informed his teaching choices. In Monterey County, Fred established 3 successful programs. The Men's Alternative to Violence program in the area, an experimental program for welcoming diversity and developing community leadership, the Community County chapter of the National Coalition Building Institute, and the Breakthrough Men's Community, an ongoing commitment to create a new community and culture that better honors the gifts and full humanity of all men and women. He is grateful that he has been able to combine his marriage, family life, and career with his own journey of liberation from the ignorance, arrogance, and isolation of the segregated white community of his New England childhood. Folks, Fred Jealous.
Thank you all for including me and the Whites for Racial Equity group in this wonderful, informative, necessary educational program. And before I start talking about Whites for Racial Equity, I want to reinforce what Rosalind said about the school board meetings in Monterey. It was a very painful example of what happens when a group of people who are in pain and in need of resources for their children speak up and ask for the money to be spent on something that they believe is helpful. It's a great example and a sad example of what happens when they run into the wall of white supremacy. And the wall is put up. And it was a brutal thing to witness. So we all do need to get behind making that change for next year. So I'm going to assume that Whites for Racial Equity is probably not an organization that you know much about, and that you probably have some questions. A group of white people working for racial equity, what's the deal? What's going on? Having had so much experience with the wall of white supremacy. So I'm going to spend most of my time just laying out who we are and how we got started and what we've been doing. Most of the people who are members of Whites for Racial Equity have been people who've been active in human rights, civil rights, gender equity for many years. Like I have and many of my friends have. But in the accumulation of so many innocent people of color being murdered by the police just triggered this saying, okay, we've got to do some more. We've got to do something different. We've got to get a louder voice. We've got to get more active. We've got to take responsibility for ending white supremacy. So a group of people got together a little bit over 2 years ago and formed this very informal group called Whites for Racial Equity. And I like the name Whites for Racial Equity because it sets out a vision of that speaks to outcomes, and outcomes for all groups of people. Racial equity is realized when race can no longer be used to predict outcomes. And that's a good vision to hold and a good thing to work for. And who Who are these people, these white people who have joined Whites for Racial Equity? Well, this is our statement about who we are and what we believe, most of it. We are people who have been socialized to identify as white. We realize that this identity is rooted in white supremacy, and it has served as a tool of oppression for hundreds of years in the United States. We recognize that while we have many social and economic privileges, we have paid a great cost by having the humanity we share with all people distorted by being indoctrinated into a system of white supremacy. In order to dismantle white supremacy and to work for racial equity, we know that we must educate one another, reflect upon and deepen our awareness and actions, and be accountable to people of color. And be accountable to people of color. Cultivating greater racial competency and examining the ways in which we consciously or unconsciously enact our own white privilege can be difficult and uncomfortable. I think in the last 2 years of having white people get together in groups and really do take a good hard look at the history of racism in this country right from the get-go and up to the present moment. One of the things that's been the hardest for white people to deal with is they were never educated about how intentional this was. They were never educated they went through high school, they probably didn't get much of an education about it at all. But just all the intentional attempts to see that people of color did not advance in this country, what most of them were ignorant of. So a lot of the struggling that they've done in the study groups this year has really, in the past 2 years, has really focused on that. So we have meetings once a month that are, actually they're every other month now because we've shifted to 1 month we have a meeting for action and 1 month we have a meeting for study. But we have these meetings where white people gather once a month to do the work of dismantling white supremacy. That's our work. We have to do it. And we do it separately from people of color because too often there's a temptation to hand over the job of educating white people to people of color. And also, people of color don't need to sit around and watch white people stumble out of their ignorance and arrogance. So that space. But the other events that we do once a month, anti-racist, books that are anti-racist, and also films that are anti-racist, are open to everyone, and they're open to the general public. And we don't see our group as in any way a replacement for multiracial activity at all, but rather as strengthening our ability to participate in activities that move the community towards racial equity, and also strengthen us in our ability to work with people of color in ways that we are accountable to them. The organization, just so that it's clear, is 100% volunteer. We cover our own expenses. We're not incorporated. We don't go out in the community searching for charitable funds from foundations. And any money that we happen to take in at our events, half of it goes to organizations that are led by people of color. And we've given money to the Village Project, Families of Color in Monterey County, Black Lives Matter, and to a playground rebuilding project in Seaside. It's not a lot of money because we don't deal with a lot of money or collect a lot of money at our events, but we do stick with that. We partnered with organizations like the NAACP, DACA, CSUNB, the National Coalition Building Institute, Building Healthy Communities and the Rancho Cielo Project, the Village Project, Black Lives Matter, Allies at the Monterey Institute, the Big Read Project at the National Steinbeck Center, Monterey County Equal Opportunity Office. We've done vigils in Monterey, Seaside, and Salinas. The last one we did was a vigil for remembrance and unity. It was done over the Jazz Festival weekend, around the Jazz Festival, where we were remembering the innocent men and women who were murdered by the police, as well as making a plea for unity in moving towards racial equity. We've participated in poetry slams, been on panels, we've done a series with Combined Destinies. If any of you are curious about reading about white people who have a lot of pain about racism, this is a book that we worked with. It was actually written by my wife Anne and one of her friends, with a foreword by Julian Bond. It's called Combined Destinies, White People Sharing Their Grief About Growing Up in a Racist Culture. And we have them for sale over at the table. We have a website. If any of you want to direct anybody to look up for resources that are helpful to getting people involved in racial equity or encouraging them to be part of ending white supremacy, then I encourage you to look at that website. It's one of the best things we have done. It's an excellent, excellent resource, and you can send it to your friends all over the country. So that's some of the things we have done. Now, Willow asked me to answer two questions as part of my presentation, so I'm going to end with that. The first one is very simple, and it's a question about accepting the leadership of people of color, white people accepting leadership of people of color. And why is it important for white people to do that? That's a real simple one to answer, because people of color are the experts on their lives and the needs of their community. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's not complicated. The difficulty is getting white people to accept their place in the scheme of things and welcome and support. And that's one of the things that we try and do in Whites for Racial Equity, is follow the lead of the groups that are run by people of color when they ask us for support, participation, whatever we need. The other thing is, which I'm going to turn into an even bigger project, is why would white people care about racial equity anyway? And so, here's a few of the answers. We're going to get up to 100 before I stop. But because once white people know the extent to which the system is rigged, once we start seeing how brutal it really is and how intentional it is, we want to do something to make things right. Because our longing to connect with people of other cultures is blocked by our indoctrination into white supremacy. Because the help of white people is needed in order to end racism. Oh my gracious, 30 seconds. Can I have 48? Thank you. I'm excited about this list. And Dick Gregory has got great humor, and irreverent humor, which I really like. So this whole question of needing white people, this is the way he said it. Racism is the dog that guards the white man's house. If we could have killed that bitch alone, we would have done it a long time ago. That's his language. Because championing racial equity helps to break down barriers between us and people of color and between us and white people. Because championing racial equity allows us to be reconnected with our full humanity and the full humanity of people of color. A lot of white folks carry a tremendous amount of grief about their separation from people of color because of basic human rights. Look at the Declaration of Independence for starters. Because our treatment of African Americans and other people of color contradicts the values we claim to believe in. Because the U.S. will always lack basic integrity if we continue to benefit from the economic and social oppression of non-whites. Because the more we expand our hearts, the more we can learn, grow, and benefit from the diversity in this country, which is one of the great benefits of living in the U.S. Because whites are emotionally and spiritually stunted by our unexamined reliance on privilege. Because American popular and literary culture is so profoundly the product of black culture, and thus we owe a huge debt to African Americans. Because the social cost of racial inequity will eventually destroy American society, either through increasing oppression and inequity or eventual unrest. Because we are already paying for racial inequity in the state of our prison system, our cities, and our stunted souls. Because, to paraphrase a friend of mine, the only response to the outrageous pain caused by white supremacy is outrageous love of all of our brothers and sisters.
Wow, now I get to speak after that, huh? So, now is the opportunity where if y'all have any questions, and I know that y'all have a lot of questions, so please, don't all y'all raise your hands, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. But we're going to have 7 minutes right now to allow folks that want to ask the panelists any questions to go ahead and ask questions. So, we have the first hand raised over here.
So I want to thank you for the work that you all do. And the question I have is, what does the future look like for the ice raids that happen, because they're still happening? And for me, I've never been to an ice raid. I kind of don't want to be in one. They come at us nowadays like the Gestapo, right? I don't know what these guys' fascination with AR-15s are, but they come at us like we're some enemies. And we're just folks, we're just people. Whether you're born here or born in Mexico or Central America. And it's a big deal, it is a big deal. It's our dignity. It's just basic, just some basic humaneness. And these recent individuals here in the White House obviously have set the tone, the political climate, which hyper up the whole atmosphere. So whatever organization you represent, which I appreciate what you all do, what do you suggest or what do you predict for the future? How can we stop the ice raids?
I'm going to get my workout right now. Woo!
So there's a number of things we could do. One is you hope for the best and plan for the worst. So first of all, speaking as the Labor Council, we need better people in office, including the guy in the Oval Office. So that's the one thing we got to do. He's in there now. See how long he lasts, but at least 3 years from now. The second is making sure that there's information out there. It's, like I said earlier, plan for the worst. There's going to be raids. What does that mean? I come from an immigrant family. My mother came in a trunk of a car. My dad crossed over the Arizona desert. My parents met during an immigration raid. He ran and met my mom. So as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid, I was afraid my parents were not going to come back and pick me up from school or show up because they would have gone deported. So one of the things that we've been doing as part of building healthy communities and others and we're going to need your help on is we have a preparedness kit that Nikki's office helped draft, and then we've worked with local entities to get that started, where it prepares people in case there is raids. There's a document in there you could use, so the family member that talks to somebody else that who's going to take care of the child could have school rights, medical rights to do the immediate. We don't want kids going into child protective services, foster care. They want to go to a neighbor, a family member, and preparing that. And that same kid is helping people prepare important documents. There's the red cards. Nikki said it real clear. You have rights. The United States is a beautiful country. You have rights. So be prepared. There's red cards in the back. There's a rapid response network here in the area, but as immigrants, we got to be prepared. And we have to get loud. We have a member of Congress here, Jimmy Panetta. He's a Democrat. He's supposed to be on our side. He is on our side. But there's others in Congress and the Senate that need to hear from the Central Coast, need to hear from communities across the country. We need to do better. So there's practical things, a family preparedness kit, red cards, knowing your rights, coming to events like this. And then there's the get out there, get loud, elect right people. The city of Seaside passed a sanctuary city resolution. Salinas, the county, others did. They stood out to the White House. The White House is fighting back. The SB 54, California made a statement that at the end, like Nikki said, the hierarchy, the triangle, it's the federal government on top. Nothing, just to be clear, sanctuary resolutions are important as a statement, but it doesn't prevent federal agents from coming to your community. Seaside Police Department is not going to stand at the border holding back federal agents. They can't. We can make sure that they don't cooperate with them, but they're still going to come. So just to be out there, be safe, know your rights. Is that a good?
I think that's, a fantastic response. I think one of the challenges right now is that it is so unpredictable. So we can't really give you any insights as to what we think is going to happen, but we do know that they are trying to ramp up deportations. One of the things that they really found to be an effective way of doing that is by partnering with local law enforcement, which is why SB 54 is so important, and because it stops that collaboration and that connection. But at the end of the day, ICE is going to do what ICE is going to do. And so, it's really what, Cesar said, is just about being prepared and doing what you can in anticipation of the worst. And I think that, it's not very reassuring, but I think it is important to remember that there are things that you can do. You do have rights, there are resources, there are actions that you can take. I think there is a lot of panic that can result from, suspected raids or reports of impending raids, and so the rapid response networks are really great as a tool to kind of verify what's actually happening, so that you actually have good information, that you know what's taking place in your communities, so that you're able to respond. And I think that, in addition to the things that Cesar mentioned, I just wanted to throw out a few additional resources. One is there is a website that the ILRC, it's a statewide collaboration of immigration service providers called Ready California. And on that website, you can find legal service organizations that are good, reputable, they won't take your money, they won't, they're not going to be fraudulent. And you can go in and get low service legal help and try and find out if you're eligible for any type of immigration relief. And I think that's a really important thing to do, because they can give you some individualized advice as to what you can do and what steps you can take to help protect yourself. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that there's a lot of people in our community who have green cards who can naturalize,
and they just haven't yet. And so, if you know somebody who might want to take that next step and become a U.S. citizen, there are a lot of resources and there's a lot of benefits to that too, right? If you are a citizen, then you can vote, you can influence elections, and that's really important. It's also the only protection, like the only absolute protection from deportation. You can still be deported if you have a green card. So really it's that final protection against that from happening. But then it also means that you can then petition and try and help your family members to get legal status. And so there are a lot of benefits to naturalizing and getting that citizenship, and there are a number of organizations across the state that are working to try and help people to submit their applications, so you can get the assistance from an attorney without actually having, you have to pay the fee if you can afford it, but you don't have to pay for the attorney to help you prepare your application. And so there is a website that has a lot of resources called the New Americans Campaign, and it has resources about how you can naturalize. And so, unfortunately, we can't give you any insight, and I wish we could, but really as advocates we're very much reacting to what the federal government is doing, and the best we can do is try and help you all be as prepared as possible.
So I hope that answered your question. Yeah, we have another question over here.
Hello, I just wanted to thank the panel again for remarkable presentations, very diverse presentations, and especially to Roslyn. Roslyn, I see you, and I just want to acknowledge you for your leadership. You are a very powerful speaker and presenter, and I think you are the leaders we want to be investing in, and you're just modeling just great leadership, and thank you for all you do for this community. And to Mr. Fred Jealous, I don't think I've met you, but as someone, I don't live here, but I grew up here, and I think it's as someone who is doing a lot of work around racial justice, it's really physically, when I hear white people speak with the conviction that you do, I think it gives me hope, because we oftentimes are the ones that have to be speaking out against systemic oppression that manifests in ways that it's, school to prison, affordability of housing, you name it. And so when you speak, I think it just, we need more white folks like you that are helping to dismantle the systems of oppression. And Cessa, great job.
Does anybody have any questions? I have like a live feed right here. They're just jumping at me right now. So we have a member right here so what is it? So now that the DACA date has expired, for those students that that did not renew or that did not have the funds to renew, what resources and or what is it that they could do to help out current DACA students?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. It's what can you do to help people that no longer have DACA?
So what is it that for the individuals that didn't renew their DACA when the date was expired, what resources are out there for them, or what can we do?
Okay. As I mentioned briefly, the DACA program was rescinded in early September, and basically there was a 1-month period where individuals whose DACA expired between that date, September 5th, and I think it was March 5th, had 1 month to renew their DACA application, which would extend it for another 2 years. It would give them work authorization for another 2 years. And anybody who passed that deadline or who had not already received DACA or who was not eligible to renew, they were just out of luck. And so really, as what we're seeing now is just kind of a slow trend of people who are losing their DACA status. And so in terms of what they can do, there's a number of things that they should know about. And on our website, we have a number of resources. And if we have our resources on the back, there's one that talks about what that means for someone who is losing their DACA status. And here in California, one of the things I wanted to flag is, if you If you had DACA, then you were able to get a standard Class C driver's license. When your DACA status expires, your driver's license will expire. You can actually just switch it to an AB60 driver's license. So we have resources on our website on how to do that. So very practical tips on things that you can do, understanding what that means in terms of, every person who had DACA was eligible then to acquire a social security number. If your DACA status expires, that social security number is still good and you can still continue to use it for things like school registration, for opening a bank account, but you cannot use it as proof of work authorization. So, you still have some benefits, but it's knowing kind of what the confines of those benefits are and what you shouldn't be doing with your social security number. And then beyond that, again, really just encouraging you to talk to an immigration attorney. There's a number of resources, there's a number of organizations out there across the state that are working together to try and provide services, low-cost services to individuals who can find out what they might be eligible for. And it's just something that we recommend. You might go in and talk to an attorney. Maybe you did this a year ago and there was nothing that you could do in terms of being able to obtain immigration status, but situations change, and that's the thing that's so difficult with immigration law is that your personal factors might change. So maybe someone in your family has now become a U.S. citizen and they can petition for you, or some other external circumstance happens. You might have been a victim of a crime, changes in different visa programs and things like that. And so really just encouraging you to know kind of what your options might be and talking to an immigration attorney to find out what that might look for in terms of a path to some sort of status.
I just wanted to ask one more question. I think that we're running out of time, but Ms. Roslin, can you let us know how much of our education dollars went into funding SROs in NPUSD? A roundabout figure?
Roughly, we spend $300,000 a year on SROs. We fund 3 cities here in the NPUSD, Marina, Seaside, and Monterey, and we match the dollars with the local agencies of about $100,000. I believe the real number is 96,000, so don't quote me, but I'm very close.
So once again, we want to go ahead and thank our panel. Round of applause. And now, before we get into this video, I also want to say that the DocuWaters from CSUV are selling shirts out there for their organization. $15 a shirt. So if y'all want to make your way over there, because they're selling like hotcakes. I think they only have they have like 15 out there. But, yeah. So go out there, get a shirt, support.
And then just really quickly, we have butterflies around the room, and if you want to get your picture taken in front of a butterfly, you can go to the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council. And we painted this in an effort to bring community awareness to the beauty of immigration. And so you see different folks from the community that are standing in front of the butterfly and supporting immigration, and the transformation that also happens when you get out of the school to prison pipeline and when you leave the system of mass incarceration behind. So that's a little bit of an explanation around the butterfly. I did the butterfly. If you were the butterfly in Seaside, I can do it here too. And then this is Valentino took the black and white photographs, and I took the pictures of the butterflies. But that's not my best photography.
And I'm going to speak my truth again. I was born here in Salinas in 1978. I'm very, very proud of being from Salinas. My parents were food workers, so, we didn't have much. I grew up living in apartments with a whole bunch of us, a whole bunch of kids running around. Most of our parents, if not all, were always working. I grew up in the East. I grew up in the Valley of the East. My first contact with the law was actually around the 6th grade for altercation, and it just kept continuing to escalate. In total, I've been about almost a good 17, 18 years of my life. Out of my 39, I've been behind the walls. So now, I'm currently the program and policy coordinator at MILPA, which stands for Northern Individual Leadership for Public Rights Movement. I've been here now for about 2.5 years. I'm blessed personally for the opportunity that has provided for not only the opportunity but the platform. We are trying to end mass incarceration. We're trying to dismantle the school prison pipeline. We're trying to build equal community power. In our ancestors' days, everybody was sacred. Everybody was embraced. And everybody had a role to play. And I think that's the vision right there, you know. So it is a message for our leadership, for our elected officials, is to look at your budgets, because your budgets speak clearly of your values. We're getting a value driven up. We're getting a new job. We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. There's just so much more that we can and should be doing with our budgets. We want public safety too. We want the same, but our vision and how we can get it is different. It's not going to come by a new jail, a new police department, a shot spotter, you know, it's going to come by investing in our community and sitting down and talk with us. Specifically, we're asking our supervisors to reinvest some of these dollars in more mental health services, OJTs, the on-the-job trainings, and specifically performing incarcerated folks. After school programs is usually when the kids get in trouble, right? Why would they invest in that? That's what we should be investing in, right? We're going to continue to organize, we're going to continue to mobilize, we're going to continue to be organized, and we're going to continue to resist.
That's right. When you talk about investing in folks, when you talk about building leadership, it is a real deal. That's amazing. So, I'm looking around the room and we still have people here. We're going to put on some music, we're going to start dancing now. But just want to thank you all very much for being here. I want to thank you all for allowing us to come and to talk to you all here in Seaside. I want to thank the residents here that were able to organize, that were able to come together and make Seaside a sanctuary city. And I see some folks here that were leading those organizing efforts, and I just want to really thank them and show them a round of applause, because that's so beautiful that I really come together. So, yeah. There's organizations around if you want to go ahead and get some more information. Like I said, there's shirts out there being for sale for $15. So you can buy one for $15, you get one free, so that's 2 for 1. So there's black shirts out there. If you haven't got a black shirt, go ahead and grab one. And there's a lot of food over here. There's tacos, there's tostadas, chorizo con papas, ensalada, cafecito, Mexican bread, pan dulce. So, por favor, please take some home. Muchísimas gracias. And before we leave, where's Chuy? Chuy, come here. Leave us and un aplauso, por favor.
Explain it. Explain what it is.
Okay, everybody. Not expecting this, but when Cesar Chávez goes around, he would start and end the meetings with an aplauso organizado. So it's basically just follow my lead. We're gonna start slow and it's gonna speed up.